Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Ethos Online. And we create the space to be, belong, and become the very best version of ourselves. So, again, wherever you are joining us from, we want to let you know that you are loved, you're welcomed, you're accepted, you're affirmed. So, we've been moving through this series called A New Way to Be Human. And just a reminder, every series we do, all the videos, all the blogs, all the podcasts, all of it, it takes time and resources to do. And so if you would, please be kind enough to consider giving, being a partner with us in this. Go to www.ethos-church.org/donate and give what you can. Help us continue this, what we would call it a ministry. Help us continue doing what we do, putting out this kind of content. So back to A New Way to Be Human. Again, Jesus, in all of his teachings, he continues showing the Jewish people this is what love looks like when it's embodied. This is what it looks like to be a walking, breathing, living Torah, right? All the writings, all the wisdom, all of it. This is what it looks like when it walks among you. And this is what this first century group of people, these writers of the New Testament, that's what they're saying about Jesus. Jesus is the new way to be human. And so when you have Jesus go up on top of this mountainside, the writers are intentionally telling you, Jesus, just like Moses of the old, right? Jesus, just like when Moses goes up and gives the 10 Commandments, the law, Jesus is essentially doing the very same thing, but he's actually even digging even deeper into the heart of it. And so, again, Jesus, this quote, what he's doing here is he's given a deeper critique on the heart of the law. Again, the heart of the thing, the reason behind it. I think a lot of times in our culture, especially religious ones, we get really good at believing certain dogmas, doctrines, and that becomes religion, right? And that's why so many people will say, I'm spiritual but not religious. But when we look back and we understand for the Jesus movement, religion was actually a deeper position of living in the world. It's how we moved and acted. It was the rituals, yes, but it was also the very lifestyle about what it looks like to be human. And so the deeper critique of what it looks like to be human, that's what the sermon, right, the teachings on this mountain were really all about. And so Jesus becomes the individual who speaks to a group of people who lost their temple, who lost everything, lost their hope. The place that they worshiped, the identity that they had is all gone. Jesus becomes the new picture of what Israel, and not just Israel, but the world could potentially be. Beautiful, right? And so in these teachings, this Law 2.0, right, Moses 2.0, what we have is we start with a bunch of blessings. And essentially what that is, Ishrei, it's essentially saying, if you do this, these consequences will happen. And last week we talked about how we don't do certain things, or we shouldn't do things just to get something in return, right? Because that's a very selfish, a self-motivated way of living in the world. And it actually creates, when we do things out of obligation, it creates a lot of resentment. We begin to see others as obligations rather than people we're journeying on and with in our lives. Friends, family, loved ones, kids. I spend time with my kids, not because I have to, but because I want to. And so last week we talked about learning to embody that. This week, this blessing, it sounds very similar to the last one, but I want you to hang with me because there's a slight shift in this one. And that shift, I think, is a really beautiful one. Because when you do the thing, when you begin to embody the thing, you begin to clearly see it. And so let me share with you. Matthew 8, it says this, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." Now, I grew up in a purity culture, right? Evangelical, fundamentalist, purity culture. And we often believe that many people that you could be perfect. Right? You could be the kind of person that you were like an angel, right? You did nothing wrong and you got everything just down right. And so many people even believe that someday we'll leave here and we'll go up there and we'll live in this perfect state, which again, if you look at the concept of perfect in the Greek, what that was essentially a static state of being. no conflict, no change. For me, and I'm speaking for me, that sounds like hell. Without change, without shifts, without pain, there is no growth. There is no shift. There is no evolution of me. It's just flatlining. And so it's really important to understand we're not talking about perfection here when we talk about pure. The word pure here means something different. Here's what it means. Kathros, it means virtuous. It means when someone is sincerely doing something because they want to. And again, it's a balance of like your heart and your soul. It's a balance of I'm doing this because I genuinely care about others, but I also understand that it's just coming out of me. And so we talk about this. Jesus often would poke fun at the religious and the political people. Because for the religious and the political people, they were not doing it out of a sincere heart. They weren't doing things because they wanted to genuinely love people and because they embodied it. They gave, but they gave only when others saw. Think about that in our culture today. Like, we are constantly on Facebook, right? Constantly on Instagram. And what's interesting about Facebook, Instagram, Twitter is we always put our best selves out, don't we? We never share like the honest truth of what's going on. We take a picture when we get a haircut. We take a picture when we lost weight. You don't ever see people say, this is me right now and I'm kind of struggling. No, we only put that picture up after we've experienced this or that. And so again, one of my favorite memes right now, shout out to the FB life pretenders. Pretending to be good moms to their kids, pretending to be in a wonderful relationship, pretending to be living in an awesome life, right? We in our culture, we're really good at pretending. And what's even more interesting is when we see, with the knowledge that other people are pretending, we'll go online, we'll see others pretending, we'll be aware that they're pretending, and yet we'll still feel bad about ourselves. We'll still begin to model ourselves and kind of hold ourselves up against that as like a standard, even though we understand it's not really true. Weird, right? We do this all the time and we miss it. It's not about that, but we often will pretend, we'll make these false statements, we'll do things, right? We'll put things out there because we think we're going to get something in return. We put things out there because we think others will think better of us. We do it for me, right? It's not a pure intention. It's something else. And so when you look at Psalm 51:10, I think David is one of the perfect examples of like, man, I want to shift. And so one of my favorite verses and one of my favorite prayers lately is, create in me a pure heart. And I want you to think about that phrase, create in me. That means that something had to die in order for the new thing to live. Yeah, create in me, build something new in me. Like, can you imagine if every morning you woke up and you said, today I want to start it differently. Today I want to create a very different way of living in the world, and I want to live in it today. Create in me, like change the very things that keep wanting to be the center of attention. Change the very selfish motivations I have. Help me work through those things so that I can begin to embody love in this way. Create in me a pure heart. Transform me. Give me integrity. Yeah, beautiful. And knowing, like David didn't always live that way, but he was striving for it. That's a really beautiful idea. Striving for it, not because he had to, not because he was going to get something in return, creating me a pure heart for something deeper, right? Jesus, he's constantly giving these like warnings to the political and religious systems that were kind of known for doing this, for doing things in order to gain something in return, doing things even though it hurt other people. Watch what he says here, because what he says here, it's kind of painful. So here we go. He says, woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites, right? Very similar passage to what we had last week. You are like, watch this now, whitewashed tombs. Beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of bones of the dead and everything unclean. I think in the first century, like he's nailing it. But I would also argue in our culture today, pretty close to true too, right? We can oftentimes look so perfect, like we have it all together, and yet the reality is when we get home, we're an absolute mess. We create all these really interesting masks, but deep inside, we're struggling. And did it ever occur to any of us that maybe if we stopped doing that and we were more real, more honest, more open, it might create something better in us? And it might actually open others to begin being better, loving people in return if we just stop faking it. So Jesus is essentially saying, let's stop faking it. Let's swiftly change the narrative here, right? Their piety, one of my favorite writers says, their piety and good deeds brought them attention, and they saw themselves lifted high. Every time these religious and political leaders did anything, it was really all about them. And it kind of reminds me, I went on a mission trip. I'd never gone on a mission trip before. And I had my doubts. I was a little frustrated about it. I've done a podcast on this before. But I went on this mission trip, and I started to notice as I was speaking every day. I was there for a week at this place speaking. And as I'm sharing, I become more and more aware that these people have like real issues. And like they need water, they need clean water, they need clothing. And here I am preaching to them every night. And it started to connect with me that, man, like maybe we came here and maybe we didn't really consider their needs over our own. We took care of our own hotel rooms and they were nice. We had all these great plans of what we were going to see and all this kind of stuff. And yet we didn't really consider the needs of the people we were visiting. And for me, it like hit home. The ultimate moment, like that was just, I cringe. It makes me kind of sick. Was we were doing a bunch of chores for people, and chores that they probably could have done better themselves. But they were painting a fence, and there's this fence being painted, and no lie, we were almost done, right? And what they needed was a photo op. And so there were only 2 people actually painting the fence. The rest of us doing other things. But they called all of us over, a bunch of us, and they gave us all paintbrushes. And we were supposed to stand there and pretend like we were painting for the photo op. And so we're standing there, and I'm feeling like a complete ass, and I'm holding the thing up and I look over and I see the workers there, the actual workers who lived there, and they're laughing at us. Because the truth is, they probably picked up on it too. We were there for the photo op. We were there to look good. We were doing the thing not because they needed the fence done. They probably could have done a better job. We were there to be seen. We wanted people to recognize us. We were not really doing it out of the pure goodness of our heart. We were there painting that fence for the photo op. And how painful was that? A pure heart needs no attention from others. It does good because its heart yearns and thus sees not themselves, but God. Hemingway says that. We see, notice this, when we do things out of the goodness and pure love out of our hearts, we don't see ourselves reflected back. We see the divine. Think about that for a minute. Because if I'm doing something only for myself, if I'm painting the fence only for the photo op, what I'm going to get back is my own reflection. But if I'm doing things out of the goodness of my heart, if I'm doing things because I literally care about you, and here's the shift that's different about last week. When I do that thing, I see the face of God. I see the picture, I see the presence, I feel the presence of the divine. And I don't care what God is to you, a force, an energy, a middle-aged white man, whatever. When you do good things out of the love that is spilling over in you, you experience the divine. And so I might ask you, what motivates your actions? Because if it's self-motivated, you're just getting a reflection of you. And you see you a whole lot more than you care to, don't you? But if you're choosing to do things out of the love and the goodness of your heart, that opens up all kinds of beautiful landscapes. It opens you up and you grow bigger and deeper and stronger. It opens you up to a beautiful picture of the divine. And so I might switch Jesus. I might paraphrase Jesus' words like this, today's culture. I might say, pure-hearted giving opens one's eyes to the divine. Pure-hearted giving opens us up to something far bigger than ourselves. So how do we do it? Right? Again, if we talk about it and we don't actually talk about how to live it, not really much application. It's not going to help me in the long run. So how do we do it? Here's a couple things that I've been thinking about for myself that I want to begin I want to begin applying every day. One of them is this: asking every time I do something, asking this question of myself, do I even care? Right? Like, do I care about this homeless person I'm about to give $1 to? Do I care about the people I'm volunteering for? Because the truth is, if I don't care, if I'm not really interested in the people or the organization or whatever it is, then I'm doing it out of a very selfish motivation. And the only thing I'm going to see is me. And that's a really shallow way of living. So ask yourself this question, because I'm going to begin doing the same. Do I even care? Number 2, am I connected? Right? Am I connected? Is my interest coming from a place of empathy because I know them? Or is it just coming from a place of like, I'll just choose that one, or that's the easiest organization to connect with because it's connected to my church or whatever. Do I know them? Is this coming out of a place of knowing the people around me? Am I connected to it, or am I just standing at a distance? There was this pastor once I heard about. He actually moved his family. He moved his family to the heart of the city that he was pastoring, because beforehand he was living about 20 miles outside of the city that his church was in. And he decided, I'm no longer going to stand at a distance. And so he moved his family. And what they did is they started going home to home and just meeting people, not to evangelize and get them to their church. But this dude did it differently. He said, I just want to get to know my neighbors. And what he did is, as he got to know them, he found they had different needs. And so he began to work together with his community there to begin taking care of the needs they all had. And what he did is essentially he began to empathize because he became one of them. He was actually living in the neighborhood he was helping. Do I know the people I'm working for? Am I connected? Next, ask a question to yourself. Are there any returns in this? Am I doing this to get anything out of it? Because if you're doing something and there is a return, ask yourself if you're comfortable with it. Is this the motivation behind it, or is it just kind of like an extra positive thing? Am I doing this only for the college credit? Right? Why am I doing it? What's the return? If there is none, and yet you absolutely love doing it, like you're hitting on something really good there. Yeah. Another one. What comes out? And this is what I mean. When you're talking with people, when you're talking about the thing that you're doing, the volunteer work or whatever it is, when they say, man, like, how did you respond to this or that? How are you talking about it? Are you talking more about yourself or about the kids you're serving? Are you talking about how great you are and all of this about you, or are you spending more and more time talking about them, the organization, the movement? Because if your verbiage is more about them and less about you, then you're probably on the right track. Lastly, how do you respond to attention? Because inevitably, as you talk about the thing that you're doing, right, to other people, many people are going to say, oh, you're such a saint. You're doing so great. Wow, you're a great individual. You're such a perfect human, blah, blah, blah. Keep your radar up. How are you responding to those people? Like, are you feeling great about the praise? Are you taking it all in? Oh, stop. Keep it coming, please. How are you responding? Because if it's building up your ego and you're like, yeah, I'm going to go volunteer more, there's probably a problem. You probably are self-serving. Or are you saying, not a big deal. It doesn't affect you. It's just not that important to you. How are you responding to the praise you're given? And again, don't do the fake like, oh, please, no, it's not me. It's, whatever. People understand that BS as well. But just ask your heart, like, how am I responding to the praise I'm getting? Yeah, interesting. I want to end with this. My daughter, years and years ago, she was 2. We were walking down this street called Pearl Street. Tons of homeless people there. And my daughter, we're walking, and there's this old man in a wheelchair, and he's got his vet hat on, and he's just kind of holding this cardboard box with a thing on it. And she says, "Dad, can I have $1 to give him?" Yeah, sure, Ashlyn. So I hand her the $1. She goes up, hands it to him, and I'm just kind of watching, like, yeah, that's good. That's my daughter. And then she does something that like shocks me. Because anyone can just give $1. Anyone can give the $1, do the donation, whatever, walk away, and you can feel good. But my daughter doesn't stop there. My daughter walks up to the wheelchair, hands him the $1, and he kind of looks up at her. The way he was acting, I can only assume he was a bit inebriated. He kind of looks at her, and then she reaches up, and she gives him this big bear hug that only this little kid could give. Just a good squeeze. Hugs him. And then she walks back. And I'm watching this and I'm thinking, oh. Because she did the thing that no one else did. The $1, nice to have, I'm sure. But the hug was human. The hug said, I care deeply about you. And when she hugged the individual, all of us watching, we saw God. All of us watching got this beautiful, perfect, good picture of what giving, loving looks like. We experienced the divine that day because my daughter was just overflowing with love. And I think that's maybe what Jesus is talking about here when he says, blessed are these people, these pure in heart people. Pure-hearted giving opens one's eyes to the divine. And not only my own eyes, but everyone around me. And I love being around those kind of people, the pure in heart. Yeah, so good, right? I love y'all. Thank you so much for joining me today. As always, please consider giving ethos-church.org/donate. If you want to be a part of the discussions we have online, the 1st and the 3rd of every month, we have our living room sessions where we meet, we talk, people from Colorado, Washington, Michigan, all over. We get together and we have conversations, California, everywhere, Idaho. It's been awesome. So join us. Email me at tonywerfel@gmail.com, and we'll get you connected. And as always, please subscribe, and donate. I hope that those buttons are there as I'm pointing down. That could look weird. Love y'all. Take care, and can't wait to join you next week as we continue moving through this series, A New Way to Be Human. Bye.